So I'm really excited to moderate this upcoming panel on building and growing a startup in this space. And you've seen a bunch of the startups out here showcasing and demoing, and you heard from Roni, one of the founders of quite a big startup in the space. But let's really dig deep and try to understand what it's like in the trenches. What I find so interesting is that these folks are innovating and are entrepreneurs in an industry that doesn't really exist, that's being created as they are innovating. So I think it'll be a really interesting conversation. The four panelists here today, we're super lucky to have them. Let me introduce them. Danny Belch is actually a recent grad from HBS, so we got him back here to visit us. He's also showcasing out here his company Strive. Is it Strive VR or Striver?
Striver.
Striver, okay. Striver, cool name. Which is a leading VR company for sports and entertainment and also going into a lot of other industries. So I'm excited to talk to Danny about that. Steve Domenicus is the founder and CEO of Tacti, which is developing the world's first wearable device that enables users to actually touch and feel the virtual objects like they can do in real life. I haven't tried the demo. I'm dying to do it. I hear it is amazing. And he also is demoing out in the showcase. And Amit here is a founder and managing partner of Presence Capital, a VR and AR-focused VC fund out in the Bay Area. But he also co-created and launched the game Farmville that we all know and was the CTO of Zynga Japan. So I'm really excited to talk to him about what he's looking at and what types of ventures are of interest to the VC industry right now. And then down at the end, Luna is a second-year MBA student at the business school right now. She's also a founder of a venture here, being incubated here at the iLab. And has also consulted with many leading VR AR companies on cross-border business development between US and China. She also worked at a VC this summer that maybe she'll talk a little bit about. But she's been a phenomenal collaborator here at Harvard around the VR and AR industry, so we're really happy to have her here today. So I thought just to get started, I would cold call on Amit here to give us a little bit of an overview about the industry and what you're interested in and what's exciting in your world since you live, eat, and breathe this every day.
Yeah, definitely. Just a quick show of hands. How many people here have tried VR, like the Vive? All right, good. And how many people have tried some form of AR, like the HoloLens or something like that? Okay, so these are very different industries. I know we kind of tend to group them together, and I think as time goes on, we'll start to split those. But the reason that we decided to start a seed stage fund in this space was because we're seeing a lot of the same things that happened on social and mobile also happen in VR. So VR enables a whole new form of user-computer interaction. AR will as well once those devices start to come out. So for us, anytime you have these like platform shifts, there's opportunities for new businesses to be created, for new people to come in and try new things out that eventually can become something much larger, something that the big companies necessarily can't do because they're not necessarily willing to invest as much in to start these industries. So we've done about 22 deals in this space, all seed stage since last year. About split between VR and AR. Obviously, like the devices are starting to come out this year. The Vive, the Oculus both came out this year. Next week's gonna be a really big week for VR. Google's has an event on October 4th. There's Oculus Connect 3, which is Oculus's big press event where I'm sure they're going to announce a lot of really great stuff. And then Sony Playstation Vr is coming out in 2 weeks. So this industry is changing very rapidly. This year, we, even though the high-end devices are out, we think it's, going to be less than 1 million units shipped between the Oculus and Vive combined. Mobile VR is probably around like 10 million units for like something like a Gear VR. But next year, as Google's Daydream starts to get more of a following, hopefully start to see 20, 30, 40 million mobile VR devices and obviously a lot more on the high-end side as well. So for us, everything that we're investing in right now is mostly in teams that we think can weather a storm. Almost all the companies that we invest in, we try to make sure that they have at least 2 years of runway, because it's going to be a while before you can make real money, at least on the consumer side of this business. There are opportunities to do more B2B and make money that way, especially when the form factor or the cost of the hardware is negligible for the people you're selling to. So, we're really excited for what's happening. But the way to think about this right now is this is like 2006 for smartphones. The iPhone hasn't come out yet. We're all using like these kind of like these BlackBerry devices. Like you see the potential, but just like the really key like smooth user experience isn't there yet. So that's how we think about the space and how we invest.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because these folks that are starting ventures today are the pioneers in this industry that someday we're going to look back on and say, remember when here at the iLab there was a panel, and you're going to be a giant company, and Tacti is going to be ubiquitous, and it's so interesting to be here at this very early stages to talk to the folks that are doing it. So I know Steve has some slides to show us about Tacti. So why don't you take it next and just give us an overview and a discussion about what it is you do, because I think it's difficult to understand and explain.
Great, thank you. Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
So I'll take a bit of a perspective to bring everyone to date. Is this an exciting technology? Quite obviously, but I think it's important to note that for the last 121 years, we have had Windows. And this little device you see on the left of the slide is something that was invented in 1891 by a French inventor called Louis de Prince, and then it was adopted by Edison. It was called the Kinetoscope. So this thing, basically people would peek through a little hole, another window, and then they will kind of see moving sequences of figures. So it has taken us 121 years to be on one side of the window. And what VR does, or attempts to do, is actually take us through the window to go to the other side. There's a real science about that as to why that is important. But this is really VR 121 years ago. So Edison was really smart. And what he did, he added sound to his kinetoscope. It's called a kinetograph. You can see the medical earphones there. Someone will peek through the hole again. Some venues, people still do that today, actually. And then they will actually see and hear images that they are not synchronized. But what was interesting about Edison, his patent application, he said that the people can actually watch an opera as if it were to be present. And that's really important about VR. It's all about presence. So for 121 years, we had sound, we had some vision, but we had no hands, and this is VR today. You can see our kids here with a VR headset, reaching out with their hands to touch things that they are not there. So what we do, I think we have waited long enough. It has taken us 121 years, but finally, I'm pleased to tell you, we can actually bring the hands into the equation. So our technology enables you to touch, feel, push, click, grasp, interact with a virtual object as if it were to be there. So imagine that. You can actually touch something that is not really there with pretty significant natural realism. So that is Tacti. That is sort of what we do. We bring the hands and the feeling into VR. So as Jody mentioned, being a startup here, I'm based in Boston with a great team, based in Montreal and Philadelphia with some of the top leading scientists in the world to create this technology. We're proud to do that. But this is a new space in an emerging new market. So to survive, we have to leverage and believe in the team. I'm glad to hear Amit said he invests in teams. We have we think a world-class team in the area. But also early on, VR is going to be a lot more B2B. I also agree with that as to where the opportunities may be. So we are actually working with a variety of partners, which seems to be the early opportunity for validation until this market becomes really sort of mainstream. But this is really important. As a technologist, I believe this is the future. This is not a fad. This is not something that's going to go away tomorrow. VR is the next computing paradigm, the next computing platform. The technology is getting better and better. And the way we feel, the way we define these sensations today, as perfect or imperfect as they may be, I'm quite certain that the next generation of human beings, our children, they're going to define their existence based on those sensations. So we're trying to make them as compelling as we can. So that's what we do.
Amazing. It really is. And, it kind of takes things beyond novelty to utility that, you can touch and feel the couch before you buy it and things like that.
Yeah, just on that, I mean, look, people ask usually, what are the interesting applications for that? So let's kind of pause for a moment. What are the interesting applications to touch things? Can you just imagine a few? before the obvious ones that everybody tells me in the first 2 seconds of the conversation, of something of a very intimate nature that I much rather not describe here, those things, by the way, are three-dimensional, So, and then it's interesting, what happens is people say, oh, I get it now. Well, it's much more than that, right? So how about educational experience? So our strategy, being a startup, we are working actually in a double-sided opportunity. On one side, we're working with content providers. We actually have the ability to transform content. I believe that all content, or most of all content, should be touchable. So we're working with content providers, educational space, entertainment, thematic space, to actually touch enable their content. If you add the dimension of touch, it makes it much more addictive. It's quite addictive. And then on the device side, we're working with VR tech manufacturers to actually license our reference design of our device to actually experience it. So having content more addictive and having a device that makes it more immersive, we think completes the experience. And we think that's a good place to start.
Thank you. And let's turn it over to Danny now, because Striver's been around a little bit longer. You're actually in market in the sports and entertainment industry, and now I think going into other industries as well. So can you just talk a little bit about the company and what it's doing and maybe what it's going to be doing?
Sure. So we are Striver Labs. We are basically a performance company. We're basically a VR solutions company that's helping with using VR to help with performance. So the evolution of our company is as follows. My brother started this company last February when he was working with Stanford University as a football coach. He actually used virtual reality to help train their players to get better. And about 3 months later, he had 15 NFL and college football teams, a basketball team out of the NBA, and an NHL hockey team using VR to improve their players. After that happened, a team right here called the New England Patriots, which we were working with, Visa, the company, the credit card company, wanted to use the VR footage that we captured from the Patriots, which is very intimate and on the field, and they wanted to use that for marketing purposes for fans. So we created a sort of sizzle reel for Visa and the New England Patriots. We showed it at Gillette Stadium for a game. Unfortunately, they lost badly to the Eagles last year. I remember that very specifically. And that started our sort of marketing fan experience arm, where we use VR to help brands connect with their consumers, help them basically market to consumers. And then our third line of business is VR for the corporations, for the enterprise. So working with companies like Caterpillar, Walmart, big box retail, manufacturing, to use VR to actually help train employees and help train different types of people within the organization, whether it's HR related, sales related, manufacturing related, using VR to help those people learn their craft, and better themselves.
Yeah, it's amazing because, part of the reason today exists is to showcase the fact that it's way beyond Pokemon. It's way beyond gaming. There's so many amazing novel uses and applications. So performance in general, it can cut across so many different industries.
I would just say that sort of the tenets of VR that we really like to focus on at Striver are, one is repetition. So you can replicate a lot of things in VR that are real life. You can actually replicate real life situations in virtual reality tens and hundreds of times over. And we all know that the 10,000 hour rule that Malcolm Gladwell talked about, you can basically achieve that with VR really fast. And second is mistakes are free in VR. So you can make, just like a flight simulator that pilots have been using forever, you can use VR, and if you make a mistake, nothing's gonna happen. You're just gonna sit here. That's all that's gonna happen. So how many times can we make mistakes and hopefully not make mistakes in the end? But what can we do that we might make some mistakes at the beginning, but then by the end we're fine, using VR to actually make sure that those mistakes are not costly, do not cost human life, dollars, or time, which are very important to many of you out there.
Thank you. Okay, now I'll turn it over to Luna, who has her own startup that I'm eager to learn more about, and also maybe some of your experiences in the global industry and what the industry is looking like from a global perspective.
Yeah, sure. A little bit about myself. Last year I took 1 year off from HBS to explore what the entrepreneur scene is like in China. So during that 1 year of exploration, I found VR AR is such a huge topic in China. Was such a huge topic in China, and I was just eager to learn more. And that's how I started getting into it. Applying the innovation theories that we learned here at HBS, there are two types of the innovation. One is sustaining innovation. For example, we were talking about 2006. iPhone is essentially a sustaining innovation built on previous phones. It added additional features that you can browse internet much better, and that's gave iPhone a much more a big boost compared to other phones. We see China right now also riding on that path of sustaining innovation from some of the big players there, and some including like Xiaomi or LETV, those are and Huawei, those traditional phone manufacturers. They see that VR is additional value add to their existing customers. So that's the very practical view they're taking in China from some of those players, how they see VR. So when it comes to them, they're playing, they don't really care so much about what are the high-end VR headsets are doing. Like when I was talking to Xiaomi VR people, and they were like, well, I don't think that's actually gonna gain the consumers or enter the mass market in China, because the consumers, they simply were not at the stage to adopt yet. So on the sustaining innovation path, the Chinese major players, they take a very practical view. Whatever contents that's gonna sell, and very frankly, pretty girls, that's kind of contents. Porns, you can think of that. And another one is just tourism and horror, whatever. Those are like very sensational, that gave the consumers that kind of novelty experience. That's one that they think good contents that could add on to the VR experience based on their existing user base. Now, on the other side, we also see another approach, which is seeing VR as a disruptive innovation, so targeting non-consumers. There's a challenge to that, because VR as a new platform is it's a platform challenge. It's a chicken and egg dilemma. Like those platforms, they want to sell, but they lack good contents, and those contents providers, they want to also monetize, but they also want the buy-in from the platforms to reach to the consumers. So how do you deal with that problem? So we see China, for example, they're pushing very hard into VR arcades. That's targeting non-consumers. So people who previously have not really tried a VR experience, now they see, with HTC Vive, with Oculus, or the coming Sony PSVR, they can gain this experience they never tried before. So that's another path we're seeing right now in China. A lot of there is a 450 million industry fund that I was previously involved in helping starting last year when I was in China. They invested heavily in content, and also they invested in distribution, those VR arcades, to immediately be able to monetize on the contents that they invested in. So sorry, a little bit long, but it's very interesting play.
It's really fascinating. And it just made me think about market timing being everything. And you're saying the Chinese market is all about what's happening now and where the demand is. Steve, can you comment on being a pioneer in an industry that the market might not quite be ready, but here you are as a startup?
Yes, that's always the fun challenge of a startup, right? So I think the key word here is perseverance. We believe that having a seat on the table is important. I mean, we're fortunate enough to have a lot of inbound interest from a variety of partners. Clearly, the pioneers of the industry are in a position to actually buy now. That's, as Amit indicated earlier, I think it's more of a B2B opportunity. But again, the market is going to happen. So for us, having enough perseverance to stay there, have enough staying power to be around when the opportunity is going to be there is critical. I think that's a function of having, as I mentioned before, a great team, and also having some experience to go where the opportunity is. And the opportunity, again, early on in this very early stage is in the B2B space with business partners that they are leading the market in a variety of areas. So that's how we managed to kind of push on and stay on the table when the adoption curve has reached a tipping point, and we can see people actually willing to begin to buy. Hopefully it answers your question, sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. And I guess what I pose to you, Danny, is you've been at this for a little bit of time now. What has been the biggest challenge? And is it moving from just sports to enterprise? Can you talk about a challenge and how you overcame it?
So with our sports training, I think the biggest challenge right now is price. We're sort of in the B2B space. A lot of these companies don't have budgets yet earmarked for VR. We're either coming out of their other budgets, experiential budgets, they're making up budget, or they have no budget. And I think a great quote from someone at Walmart said, if it works, it's not expensive. So Striver is focusing on actual use cases, using VR to actually improve people and performance. So if our teams, if our brands, if our corporations actually find use and actual benefit from VR, and it's not just a fun gaming device like you might see out here, a lot of them, they will actually buy it. However, that's been a very big challenge, is actually trying to convince them that this is actually a useful purchase for them because it's new. It looks very clunky on a head as compared to nothing on your head. And you would be surprised in some of these organizations how much budget plays and how little they might have for sort of new things, even though they love it so much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what department's budget does it come out of, and who are you calling on for those partnerships must be a challenge. Okay, I'm looking, they're telling me we're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to call on Ahmed again to kind of close this out with the future. What's the big picture? Where is the industry going next? Where should we be focusing our attention?
Sure, yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, the mobile VR is going to be very big next year, especially if you look at some of the announcements that are coming out next week. So, in terms of like right now, there's kind of a market for B2B, like that's been proven by this panel. In China with the VR arcades, like I'm a huge believer that high-end VR is going to play out in China first, but that's fundamentally a B2B play because you're selling to the arcades, you're not selling directly to consumers. So they can justify the cost of like the high-end hardware. But the cost of the hardware is going to come down. But the real question is like, what's going to be the thing that gets all of us using VR every day or like at least on a more regular schedule? So, a lot of what we're looking at right now are what are going to be those killer consumer use cases? And obviously gaming is there, but gaming right now is still kind of niche again because it's really expensive to buy into it. So I expect to see probably people, like at least on the Western markets, people's first kind of interaction with VR is likely going to be like on a plane or like in a train, places where you're able to withdraw from reality and essentially go into something where like you feel safe, you feel like you want to be distracted. So there's a YC company that announced recently that they're basically putting mobile VR on planes. Now, as you can imagine, if you're sitting on a plane and you're captive for 5 hours, sure, you're watching movies, but like what else, right? Perhaps you're playing games. Perhaps there's SkyMalt 2.0. Perhaps there's, maybe you're learning a new skill. So there's a lot of unique ways you can use that time to actually enrich people's time where they're stuck kind of where reality is not the best thing in the world. So we're really excited about those experiences. And obviously the hardware is just going to continue to evolve. So you just have to kind of keep on top of it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, this has been really great. And you're doing such amazing things in the space, and we're really excited. As I said, you guys are the pioneers, and we're excited to be able to look back and see where you started and where you're going. So join me in thanking this great panel.